Hi Stampers, this is Brenda Keenan with Keenan Kreations, and today we're going to create this landscape card using the Waterfront stamp set from Stampin Up. Now this might be called double time stamping, where you would take the white square that we've already cut out with the square stitched framelit. Ignore that because we're actually not going to use this, but we would take a little bit of adhesive. Just put a little bit on the back and place it on the front and do all of our stamping. Now you can see there and there we have a larger gap than that purple layer is going to cover, and this caused a lot of frustration in the class, and we ended up touching it up with a blender pen. But one of my customers, Denise, came up with a fabulous idea, and so I'm going to show you an easier way to make this card with the same look. So Whisper White cardstock. So this is 4 inches by 5 1/4. Now you can see I'm using this little dark line on my grid paper to help me. I know I want that horizon line, the green landscape line, to be a little higher than halfway. So I'm going to position this where it's about in the middle, and then if I stamp just slightly above that, that's kind of where I want the landscape to end or to begin. So we're going back to this little stamp here, the Pear Pizzazz ink pad, and I'm going to ink it up on the edge of the pad. I'm going to make sure I don't have any excess ink around the edges, and then I'm going to stamp this just a little above that line, and I'm kind of going about halfway in the middle, knowing I'm going to overlap in the middle. So we're actually going to stamp most of this card on this one layer, and then I'll show you the trick. We're now going to move to Highland Heather and this little mountain range part, and I can see I've got a little bit right there. So just have a little wet towel nearby to clean that up. And so I'm going to go a little bit off the edge here, and I'm just going down where I overlap that green. And watch that ink when you press right there, you can see it kind of spread a little bit. So make sure you give a nice firm pressing. So we're just going to repeat that again on the other side. And I overlap a little on the green and a little on the previous mountain range. Now I want some other mountains behind it. Sorry, a little eyelash there. But I want them to be in a lighter shade. So we're going to ink up. We're going to stamp off. And I can see I have a little bit of ink right there, so make sure I clean that up. And I'm going to go not right smack in the middle, but a little off to the side. And then press that down. And I'll repeat that a couple of times just to give a little bit more depth. When you're happy with the mountain part, we're going to go down to the lake, and we're going to use Balmy Blue. This is a pretty new ink pad. It was used a lot during my class, and I gave it a nice re-inking, and I over-inked the pad. And so I'm just going to stamp off after I ink up this stamp because I want a lighter shade. So I just go right over here and stamp off. So we're going to go not right in the center, but a little off center, and I'm going to overlap that green just a little bit, and then give that a firm pressing. Now you'll notice these stamps in the Waterfront set, they're not solid image stamps. So if you see any variation in the color, that's built into the stamp. So it's designed to give you different shades of ink. And we're just going to repeat this blue a couple of times. So I'm going to stop with that. That gives me a perfect amount of space for the greeting. And I'm not going to stamp the trees at this point. Now look what I'm noticing. So now I see that this mountain is a little bit higher here. So you know I have to add one more mountain. So let's go ahead and do that. There we go. So now what I'm going to do is go to my Big Shot. I'm going to use my square stitched framelit. This is the largest square. I'm gonna position it where I want it. So I'm gonna run it through the Big Shot and I'll be right back. Now I've run this through the Big Shot, and this stitched framelit, you have to kind of tug a little bit to get it to release the paper. Now this part pops out pretty easily because that's the straight edge cut, but this little stitching, it's kind of still stuck in the paper. So just find a corner and just gently kind of press. Don't push too hard. And you can see once it starts to release, you can kind of walk your finger across the edges and get the rest of that to pop out. You don't want to bend the paper or tear it, so be a little patient with this part and it will come out. So what we've done is we've still got the two pieces, it's just this piece has a hole in it, which you're not going to see. I want to set this back in here and stamp those trees. So we're going to use Tranquil Tide, which is a nice dark evergreen, and these trees here. So can you see there's a little bit of a gap between these two trees? So when I turn it over, I'm going to position that gap where that seam is. So what you're going to get is two trees here and one tree here. I think that looks prettier to have full trees on the square that's layered on the top. Just ink this up, and again line up that space between the second and third tree where that cut edge is, or the seam on that square, and then lift that up. So we're going to ink this up again, and again I'm putting the seam of that square right between the second and third tree. There's just a little space there for that. These are the birds that we've used to cover up a lot of mistakes on my cards. Now I was pretty careful to ink up just these three birds. Give me a second to strategically place these birds and see if we can cover that up there. So now we're going to put the card together. We're actually going to layer this piece onto the Highland Heather cardstock. And try to get it pretty centered so your border is nice and even. We're going to use dimensionals. And I'm going to set this aside for just a second so we can stamp the greeting. So we're going back to Highland Heather. We're using this greeting. I think it's from the Orchid Builder stamp set, a Climbing Orchid stamp set. It says enjoy today. So I'm going to stick it right here in the lower corner. And this is the standard card size. It's 8.5 by 5.5 and scored down the middle at 4 1/4. Just fold that on the score line. Line up your edges here. Give that a nice crease. And then we're going to layer that to the front. And then take your time to get this nice and even. I'm looking at all three sides here, and then I set this down and I can see that the bottom looks good as well. And give that a nice pressing. Now this is a piece that we had with the dimensionals on the back, so we'll layer that next. I've got some wiggle room because this layered piece, this Highland Heather, is larger than the opening, so you're not going to see the bottom. Now when I'm lining this part up, I'm looking at that green right there to line that up to the green on either side. And then that'll help you get it more centered instead of looking at anything else. Just keep your eye on the green. So I like to add a little bit of glitter to the center square just so it kind of stands out a little bit. And this is the Wink of Stella. I always make sure I go on my scratch paper in case it's really blobby. Do you see how there's a lot of silver right here? So I just want to make sure it's just sparkly and not too globby. So I'm just going to give a little bit of random sparkle on the water. I'm not really following any kind of pattern here. I just want this to stand out more than the base of the card. I also want to add a little bit of glitter to the mountain here, and I'm just kind of outlining the edges a little bit. Now lastly, I'm going to add some to the trees, and like I said, I'm just really going kind of random here. Now you'll see it's kind of bleeding the ink on that green. So you want to do the trees last, or make sure you clean this brush before you go to anything else on the card. So I went from the blue to the purple, and that didn't really transfer any ink, and the purple to the green. But this green, for whatever reason, it really kind of reactivates the color. And just make sure that you don't get that anywhere you don't want it. And I also did this one where I did not add the purple layer. So I still have the opening behind the card, but I was just really careful to layer it exactly over that opening, still popping it up with dimensionals. And I, when I inked up the mountains in Highland Heather, I also kind of inked the edges in the gorgeous grape. So you can see there's a little more variation in the mountain colors with this one than this one. So I also stamped the inside of the card to match, just a little bit of what's going on top, and the envelope as well. I hope you enjoyed today's project. For more ideas, please visit me at Keenan Kreations on my Facebook page, and you can also leave me a comment below. Thanks so much and have a great day.